The morning sky over Colorado turned black without warning. Captain Jake Morrison looked up from his coffee and watched massive shadows block out the sun. The ships were bigger than anything he had ever seen. They hung in the air like dark clouds. Silent and menacing. What the hell is that? Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez ran to the window of the military research facility. Her hand moved to her sidearm out of habit, even though she knew bullets would be useless against something that size. Dr. Lisa Park pushed her glasses up her nose and stared at the alien vessels through the laboratory window. As a xenobiologist, she had always wondered if this day would come. Now that it was here, she felt more curious than afraid. The ships had a strange organic quality, like they were grown rather than built. The attack began without any warning or communication. Bright beams of light shot down from the ships and swept across the facility. Anyone caught in the light simply vanished. Jake grabbed his radio and tried to contact the base commander, but only static came through. "Amy, get the research team to the bunker," Jake ordered. "I'll try to reach the outside." Amy nodded and started moving the scientists toward the emergency shelter. Dr. Park lingered for a moment, still watching the ships. She noticed how the light beams moved in precise patterns, like they were collecting specimens rather than trying to destroy everything. "Doctor, we need to move now," Amy called out. The bunker door had barely closed when the light beam found them. The world turned white and silent. When Jake opened his eyes, he was lying on a cold metal floor. The air smelled strange, like ozone, and something else he could not identify. He sat up slowly and looked around. They were in some kind of holding cell with walls that seemed to be made of the same organic material as the ships. Amy was next to him, already checking her equipment. Dr. Park was examining the walls with scientific interest. "Everyone okay?" Jake asked. "Define okay," Amy replied. "We're alive, we're not injured, and we're probably on an alien spaceship. So relatively speaking, I'd say we're doing pretty well." Other voices answered from around the large cell. Jake counted about 50 people, all from the research facility. They were scientists, soldiers, and support staff. All looked confused but surprisingly calm. "Has anyone tried the door?" asked Ben Carter, one of the engineers. "What door?" Amy looked around the smooth walls. Dr. Park ran her hands along the wall surface. "There has to be an opening somewhere. They got us in here somehow." As if responding to her words, a section of the wall dissolved away. 3 figures entered the cell. They were tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to shift and move like liquid. Their faces were angular with large black eyes that reflected. No light. They wore no clothes, but their skin had patterns that might have been natural or artificial. The lead alien made a sound that was part clicking and part humming. A device on its chest began to glow, and suddenly the humans could understand its words. "Primitive creatures," the alien said. "You will provide sustenance for the great harvest. Your fear will feed the Empire." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, United States Army. By what authority do you hold us prisoner?" The alien tilted its head in what might have been confusion. "Authority? We are the Zilithians. We take what we need from lesser species. You will experience terror, and we will consume it." "Good luck with that," Amy muttered under her breath. Dr. Park moved closer to get a better look at the aliens. "Fascinating. Your physiology suggests you've evolved from a completely different evolutionary tree than anything on Earth. How do you process fear as nutrition?" The lead alien, who seemed to be some kind of commander, made more clicking sounds to his companions. They clicked back, and Jake could hear confusion in their alien voices even through the translation device. "This one asks questions instead of cowering," the commander said. "The feeding organs detect almost no fear from any of these creatures. Perhaps they are defective." "We're not defective," Jake said. "We're just not impressed." Marine Sergeant Pete Collins laughed from the back of the group. I've seen scarier things in basic training. These guys look like someone stretched a lizard too far. The aliens made more clicking sounds. Their commander stepped closer to Pete, and Jake noticed that the creature's eyes were beginning to glow with a faint red light. "You will fear us," the commander said. "All species fear the Zilithians. It is the natural order, maybe on your planet," Amy said. "But humans don't scare that easy. We're the species that decided to domesticate wolves and ride around on the backs of 1,000-pound animals for fun." Dr. Park nodded in agreement. "We're also the species that looks at the ocean, which is full of things that can kill us, and decided to go swimming anyway. Fear is more of a suggestion for us." The alien commander's skin began to change color, shifting from gray to a darker shade. Jake guessed this was either anger or confusion, maybe both. "Impossible," the commander said. "Our harvest ships have taken specimens from over 300 worlds. All species demonstrate appropriate fear responses. You must be broken. Or maybe you just haven't met the right species yet," Jake replied. Katie Walsh, a Marine who had been quiet until now, raised her hand like she was in school. "Quick question. When you say you feed on fear, do you mean literally? Like fear is your food?" The aliens looked at each other again. Their commander seemed unsure whether to answer. "The terror of inferior beings sustains us," he finally said. "Your fear gives us strength and nourishment. Without it, we weaken and die." Katie grinned. "Well, that's going to be a problem for you guys." Dr. Park was taking mental notes on everything she observed. The aliens' skin color changes, their body language, the way they communicated with each other. She was building a profile of their species, even while being held prisoner. "Your feeding mechanism is fascinating," she said to the commander. "I assume you've built your entire civilization around terror farming. That would explain the dramatic appearance of your ships and the theatrical way you conduct your raids." The commander made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret. The other aliens backed away slightly, as if they were uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "You speak of things you do not understand," the commander said. "Soon you will understand fear. We have methods to ensure all creatures learn to be afraid." "Looking forward to it," Jake said. "It's been a while since we had a good challenge." Ben Carter had been examining the walls and ceiling of their prison. "The construction is interesting," he said to Dr. Park. "It's like they grew this ship rather than building it. The walls have a cellular structure." "Ben, you're an engineer," Amy said. "Any ideas on getting out of here?" "Give me some time to study their technology," Ben replied. "Everything has weaknesses. If you understand how it works." The alien commander made more clicking sounds, and his companions responded with what sounded like urgent warnings. Jake could tell they were having some kind of argument, even without understanding their language. "Sub-Commander Crickstell believes these creatures may be dangerous," the commander said, apparently deciding to include the humans in their discussion. "But this is impossible. They are primitive beings from a primitive world. We're primitive enough to figure out nuclear weapons," Amy pointed out. "And space travel, and genetic engineering. How primitive could we be?" Dr. Park smiled. "We're also primitive enough to create art, music, and literature about conquering our fears. It's one of our favorite themes." The aliens were clearly becoming more agitated. Their skin colors kept shifting, and they were making more frequent clicking sounds to each other. "You will be taken to the fear chambers," the commander announced. "There you will learn to provide proper sustenance, or you will be disposed of." "Sounds fun," Pete Collins said. "I haven't had a good scare in years." As the aliens turned to leave, their wall door began to dissolve again. The commander paused and looked back at the humans one more time. "You cannot maintain this defiance forever," he said. "All creatures break eventually." Jake smiled at the alien leader. "You're welcome to try." After the aliens left, the humans looked at each other in the strange light of their organic prison. They should have been terrified. They should have been broken by the reality of their situation. Instead, they seemed almost energized. "Well," Amy said, "this is definitely going to be interesting." The humans were moved to different cells 3 hours later. Jake found himself separated from most of the group, but he could hear Amy's voice from somewhere nearby. The new cells were smaller and had a different feel to them. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint rhythm, like a heartbeat. "Welcome to the fear chambers," a new alien voice said through speakers built into the walls. "Here you will learn what all inferior species must learn. You will learn to be afraid." Jake looked around his cell. It was completely smooth except for what looked like sensors embedded in the ceiling. Red lights began to blink, and the walls started to glow with strange patterns. "Beginning fear extraction protocol," the voice announced, the cell filled with images. Jake saw himself as a child, lost in a dark forest. He watched his worst memories play out on the walls around him. The time his unit was ambushed in Afghanistan. The moment he thought he might die. The fear he felt when his brother was in a car accident. But as Jake watched these scenes, he found himself analyzing them instead of reliving them. The technology was impressive. The aliens could somehow read his memories and project them back at him. But the images felt hollow, like watching a movie of someone else's life. "Interesting," he said out loud. "You can access memories, but you can't replicate the emotional context. These are just pictures." The images flickered and changed. Now, Jake was watching his own death played out in dozens of different ways. He saw himself being eaten by monsters, falling from great heights, drowning in dark water. The aliens were trying every fear they could think of. Jake sat down on the floor and started counting push-ups. 1, 2, 3. "You know, this is actually kind of relaxing. 4, 5, 6. In the next cell, Amy was experiencing her own version of the fear chamber. The walls showed her images of failure, of letting down her soldiers, of making mistakes that got people killed. But Amy had spent years training to deal with stress and fear. This was just another training exercise as far as she was concerned. "Is this supposed to make me scared?" she called out. "Because mostly it's just boring." Dr. Park was in a cell that tried to show her scientific disasters. Experiments gone wrong, diseases spreading, the end of human civilization through scientific hubris. But Lisa found herself critiquing the scenarios instead of fearing them. "That's not how genetic modification works," she said to one of the images. "And that plague scenario violates basic principles of epidemiology. You need to do more research." The aliens monitoring the chambers were becoming increasingly confused. Sub-Commander Crickstall stared at the readings from his control panel. The fear sensors were detecting almost nothing from the human subjects. In fact, some of the readings suggested the humans were actually becoming less afraid as time went on. "This cannot be accurate," Crickstall said to his assistant. "Check the equipment again." The assistant ran another diagnostic. "All systems are functioning normally, Sub-Commander. The readings are correct." Crickstall had never seen anything like this in his 40 years of service. Every species they had encountered showed immediate and intense fear responses in the chambers. The chambers were designed to break the will of any creature through psychological torture. But these humans seemed to be treating it like entertainment. He opened a communication channel to one of the human cells. "Why do you not fear?" he demanded. Jake's voice came back through the speakers. "Fear what exactly? Some light shows and home movies? I've seen better special effects in human entertainment." "You are witnessing your own death," Crickstall insisted. "Your deepest terrors made manifest." "No, I'm watching bad computer graphics." Amy's voice joined the conversation from her cell. "This is like a really boring video game." Dr. Park's voice came through as well. "From a technical standpoint, I'm impressed by your memory extraction technology. But your psychological profiling is completely off. You're trying to scare us with things that don't actually frighten humans. Impossible, Crixtel said. These scenarios have broken the will of every species we have encountered. Maybe because you've only encountered species that think like you do, Dr. Park replied. Humans evolved differently. We don't have the same fear responses as other species. In another cell, Pete Collins was laughing at the images on his walls. Oh, come on, he said. Giant spiders? That's the best you got? My sister has a pet tarantula bigger than these things. Katie Walsh was doing sit-ups while images of combat scenarios played around her. This is actually pretty good motivation music, she called out. The screaming really helps with the rhythm. Ben Carter was completely ignoring the fear scenarios, and instead studying the technology of his cell. He had figured out that the walls were some kind of organic computer system. The aliens grew their technology instead of building it, which meant it followed biological principles. Hey, whoever's listening, Ben said. Your biotechnology is fascinating, but it has the same weaknesses as any living system. It can get sick. Crixtel switched his attention to Ben's cell. What do you mean? Well, if this system is biological, it can be infected, it can be poisoned, it can be turned against itself. Biological systems are actually much more vulnerable than mechanical ones, once you understand how they work. The sub-commander felt something he had never experienced before. It was a cold feeling in his chest, a tightness that made it hard to breathe. He did not recognize it as fear because Zilithians had never needed to fear anything before. You are prisoners, Crixtel said. You have no power here. We're observers, Dr. Park corrected. And we're learning. Every minute you keep us here, we learn more about your species and your technology. Jake had been listening to the conversation from his cell. She's right. We're not just sitting here being scared. We're gathering intelligence. This is a reconnaissance mission now. The fear chambers were designed to run continuously until the subjects broke down completely. But as hours passed, the humans seemed to be getting stronger instead of weaker. They started talking to each other through the walls, sharing observations and making jokes about the scenarios they were being shown. Anyone else notice the aliens seemed to be afraid of the dark? Amy called out. All their scary scenarios involve bright lights and obvious threats. They don't understand subtle fear. That makes sense, Dr. Park replied. If they feed on fear, they would have evolved to create and recognize obvious terror. Subtle psychological fear wouldn't provide them with nutrition. Pete Collins had started giving commentary on his fear scenarios like he was watching a sports game. Oh, here comes the giant monster again. Look at that, same monster as an hour ago. These guys really need some new material. The humans had turned their imprisonment into a group discussion about alien psychology and technology. They were treating their captors like an interesting research subject rather than a mortal threat. Crixtel realized that not only were the humans not providing any fear energy, they were actually draining energy from the fear chambers. The biological systems were working harder and harder to try to frighten the humans, but getting no results. The chambers were beginning to show signs of stress. Sir, his assistant said, the fear chamber biosystems are showing signs of fatigue. They're consuming more energy than they're producing. That's impossible, Crixtel said, but even as he spoke, he could see the readings. The chambers were indeed failing. The humans were somehow causing the fear extraction systems to work against themselves. Commander Vexthul entered the control room. Report, Sub-Commander. Sir, the human subjects are not responding to fear extraction protocols. In fact, they seem to be damaging the chambers through their lack of fear response. Vexthul looked at the monitoring displays. He could see the humans in their cells, and none of them showed any signs of the psychological breakdown that should have occurred within the first hour of exposure. Increase the intensity, he ordered. Sir, we're already at maximum levels. Any higher and we risk damaging the biosystems permanently. Vexthel studied the readings. In his long career, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans were not just resistant to fear, they seemed to be immune to it entirely. "What are they doing in there?" he asked. Crystal activated the audio feeds from all the cells. The commander could hear the humans talking to each other, sharing observations, making jokes, and analyzing their situation like scientists studying an interesting problem. "They're learning," Crixdale said quietly. "Learning what?" "Everything. How our technology works, how our psychology functions, what our weaknesses might be." "Sir, I don't think they see themselves as prisoners. I think they see themselves as researchers." Vexthel felt that same cold sensation that Crixdale had experienced earlier. It was an unfamiliar feeling, and he did not like it. "Shut down the fear chambers," he ordered. "Sir, shut them down. We're trying a different approach." As the chambers powered down, Jake's voice came through the speakers one more time. "Thanks for the break. That was educational. What's next on the program?" Vexthel stared at the display showing the human cells. For the first time in his life, he was beginning to understand what fear felt like. Commander Vexthel paced the control room like a caged animal. The fear chambers had been shut down for 6 hours, and his crew was beginning to show signs of hunger. Zilithians needed fear energy every 12 hours to maintain their strength. Without it, they would start to weaken and eventually die. "Sir, we're receiving reports from other harvest ships," Communications Officer Dexamer announced. "They're having similar problems with human subjects." Vexthel stopped pacing. "How many?" "Ships? All of them, sir. Every ship that took human specimens is reporting the same issue. The humans show no fear response, and some ships are reporting equipment failures." The commander felt that cold sensation again, stronger this time. Across the galaxy, the Zilithian harvest fleet was encountering the same problem. Humans were not behaving like any other species they had ever captured. "Bring the humans to Interrogation Chamber 7, Vexthel ordered. "All of them. I want to observe these creatures directly." 20 minutes later, Jake found himself back with his fellow prisoners in a larger room. This chamber had a raised platform where several Zilithians stood watching them. The aliens looked different now. Their skin was paler, and they moved more slowly than before. "You're getting hungry, aren't you?" Dr. Park observed, studying the aliens with professional interest. "How long can your species survive without fear?" "Energy?" Vexthel descended from the platform. "You will answer questions, not ask them." "Actually, I think we'll do both," Jake replied. "We're curious about your biology. It's not every day we meet a species that feeds on emotions." Amy noticed that more aliens had gathered around the chamber. They were all watching the humans with those large black eyes, but something was different about their behavior. They seemed nervous. "You're all afraid," she realized out loud. "You're afraid of us." Sub-Commander Crixdale made a sharp clicking sound. "Impossible. Zilithians do not experience fear. We are the apex predators of the galaxy. Then why are your hands shaking?" Katie Walsh pointed at Crixdale's trembling appendages. Ben Carter had been studying the chamber's construction. "This is interesting. Your biotechnology is showing stress signs. Look at the walls. They're changing color in response to emotional states. But it's not responding to fear anymore. It's responding to something else." "What do you mean?" Dr. Park asked. "I think their technology feeds on the same emotions they do. But since we're not producing fear, it's trying to process other emotions instead. And I don't think it knows how to handle courage, determination, or curiosity." Pete Collins laughed. "So we're basically poisoning their computers just by being ourselves?" The aliens were making more clicking sounds to each other. Vexthel raised his hand for silence. But Jake could see that the commander was struggling to maintain control of the situation. "You will demonstrate fear," Vexthel announced, or you will watch your companions die. 2 alien guards brought in Carol Stevens, the teacher who had been captured with them. They forced her to kneel in the center of the chamber and activated what looked like an execution device. Now you will see what happens to those who do not provide sustenance, Vexthal said. Jake expected to feel fear for Carol's safety, but instead he felt anger. Cold, calculating anger. He looked around at his fellow humans and saw the same expression on their faces. "Go ahead," Carol said calmly. "I've been teaching middle school for 20 years. Death might actually be a vacation." The alien guards looked confused. Their execution device was designed to terrify witnesses, but the humans were just getting angry instead of afraid. "She's right," Amy said. "If you kill her, you still won't get any fear from us. You'll just make us mad." Dr. Park stepped forward. "But you will have wasted a valuable research subject. Carol has been observing your behavior patterns just like the rest of us. Kill her, and you lose all that data." "Data?" Vexthal asked. "We've been studying you since we were captured," Jake explained. "Every interaction, every behavior, every weakness. Carol has been documenting your social structure and command hierarchy." Carol smiled at the aliens. "Did you know you have 17 different fear responses built into your body language? And 12 different submission signals? You're actually quite expressive once you learn to read the signs." The guards released Carol and backed away. The execution device powered down automatically. "You see," Dr. Park continued, "humans don't just experience fear and then forget about it. We study what frightens us, we learn from it, we adapt to it, and eventually we overcome it." Ben Carter nodded. "It's why we survived on Earth. We learned to hunt animals bigger than us, survive in climates that should have killed us, and build tools to overcome our natural limitations. We turned wolves into pets," Katie added. "We looked at the ocean and decided to cross it. We saw the sky and figured out how to fly." "You're not the first predators we've encountered," Pete said. "You're just the most recent ones." Vexthal was experiencing something completely foreign to his species. The cold sensation in his chest was getting stronger, and he could feel his strength leaving him. But it wasn't just hunger. It was something else, something worse. "What is happening to me?" he asked, almost to himself. "You're learning to be afraid," Dr. Park said gently. "For the first time in your species' history, you've encountered something that doesn't fear you. And that terrifies you." The other aliens in the chamber were backing away from the humans. Their skin colors were shifting rapidly through shades that Jake had never seen before. "But here's the thing about fear," Amy said. "It doesn't have to control you. Humans learned that a long time ago. We feel fear, we acknowledge it, and then we act anyway." "Fear is information," Jake added. "It tells you something might be dangerous. But courage is what you do with that information." Sub-Commander Cricksdale was staring at the humans with something approaching wonder. "You feel fear, but you do not obey it?" "That's right," Carol said. "Fear is just another emotion to us. Like happiness or sadness or anger. We don't let any single emotion control our actions." Ben Carter had noticed something else about the chamber. "Your biotechnology is adapting to our emotional output. It's trying to process courage and determination instead of fear, but I don't think it was designed for that." The walls of the chamber were indeed changing. The organic patterns were shifting into new configurations, and the color was becoming brighter instead of the usual dark tones. "What's happening to our ship?" Cricksdale asked in panic. "Evolution," Dr. Park replied. "Your technology is biological, which means it can adapt. It's learning to feed on different emotions because that's what we're providing." "But courage and determination are toxic to Zilithian physiology," Ben realized. "Your species evolved to process fear. Other emotions probably make you sick." The aliens were becoming increasingly agitated. Several of them had collapsed and were being helped by their companions. The exposure to human emotions was having a physical effect on them. "You're killing us," Vexthal accused. "No," Jake corrected. "You're killing yourselves. You built your entire civilization on fear, and now you've met a species that refuses to be afraid. Your own technology is turning against you." Amy studied the weakening aliens. "How many other species have you harvested?" "Over 300. "Worlds," Crixtal answered weakly. "And they all just gave up when you showed up?" "They understood their place in the natural order." Katie shook her head. "That's not natural order. That's just bullying on a galactic scale." Dr. Park was taking mental notes on the aliens' deteriorating condition. "Your species never learned to handle anything other than fear because you never needed to. You've been the apex predator for so long that you never developed emotional diversity. But humans had to develop emotional complexity to survive," Carol explained. "We had to learn courage to hunt, curiosity to explore, determination to build, and compassion to work together." Pete grinned at the aliens. "Basically, you guys are emotional babies compared to us." The chamber's biosystems were now glowing with warm light instead of the cold illumination the aliens preferred. The walls were pulsing with patterns that seemed to energize the humans, while making the aliens even weaker. "We need to return to our home world," Vexthal said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to warn the High Command." "Good idea," Jake agreed. "But first, you're going to release all the other species you've captured." "Impossible. They are livestock." Amy stepped closer to the failing commander. "They're not livestock anymore. If your technology is adapting to process human emotions, it's probably affecting them too. They're probably not afraid anymore either." Ben Carter was studying the chamber systems with growing excitement. "That's exactly what's happening. The biotechnology is broadcasting our emotional patterns throughout the ship's network. Every system connected to the network is being reprogrammed to process courage instead of fear. Which means every prisoner on this ship is being exposed to human emotional patterns," Dr. Park concluded. "They're learning not to be afraid." The sound of distant alarms began echoing through the ship. Emergency lights were flashing, and alien voices could be heard shouting in panic. "What have you done to our ship?" Crixtal demanded. Jake smiled. "We gave it hope." The alarms grew louder as the ship's biosystems continued to malfunction. Jake could hear the sound of running footsteps in the corridors outside their chamber. The aliens were panicking, which was something their species had never experienced before. "Ben, can you figure out how to open these doors?" Jake asked. Ben Carter had been studying the chamber's control systems while the aliens were distracted. "I think so. Their biotechnology responds to emotional states, and right now it's confused. It doesn't know whether to lock us in or let us out." Amy moved to the chamber entrance. "The guards are gone. They ran when the alarms started." Dr. Park was still observing the weakened aliens. "Commander Vexthal, your crew's abandoning their posts. What does that tell you about your command structure?" Vexthal could barely stand. His skin had turned almost white, and his movements were slow and unsteady. "This is impossible. Zilithians do not abandon their duties." "They do when they're afraid," Katie Walsh pointed out. "And right now, your entire crew is learning what fear feels like." Ben placed his hand on what looked like a control panel. The biomaterial felt warm and seemed to respond to his touch. "The ship's systems are trying to process our emotional patterns. It's like teaching a computer to run new software, except the computer is alive." The chamber door began to dissolve. Beyond it, they could see corridors filled with flashing lights and the sound of alien voices calling out in distress. "Time to go," Jake announced. "Wait," Dr. Park said. "Commander, what happens to your species if you can't feed on fear?" "We die," Vexthal whispered. "How long do you have?" "Without proper sustenance, perhaps 12 hours." Dr. Park looked at her fellow humans. We need to understand something. Are we accidentally committing genocide here? Pete Collins shrugged. They were planning to eat our fear until we died. Seems like fair play to me. But we're not like them, Carol Stevens said quietly. We don't have to be killers just because they are. Jake considered this. Doctor, is there a way to reverse what's happening? Theoretically, yes. If we could isolate their biosystems from our emotional output, they might be able to return to normal function. But that would mean going back to being prisoners, Amy pointed out. Not necessarily, Ben sighed. I might be able to create an emotional firewall. Let their systems function normally while still keeping us free. Sub-Commander Cricksdale, who had been listening weakly from the floor, looked up at them. You would save us? After what we tried to do to you? We're not you, Jake replied. We don't kill just because we can. The group moved out into the corridor. The ship was in chaos. Alien crew members were running in all directions, their usual coordination completely broken down. Some were collapsed on the floor, too weak to move. Others were huddled in corners, experiencing fear for the first time in their lives. This is what you did to other species, Amy said as they passed a group of terrified aliens. How does it feel? But Jake was thinking about something else. Ben, you said the emotional patterns are broadcasting through the ship's network. That's right, every system is connected. What about other ships in the fleet? Ben stopped walking. Oh no, if the ships are networked together, ... Dr. Park understood immediately. The effect is spreading to the entire fleet. They reached what appeared to be a main corridor. Through transparent sections of the ship's hull, they could see other Zilithian vessels in the distance. Several of them were showing the same flashing warning lights as their own ship. The whole fleet is failing, Katie observed. They found a control room that had been abandoned by its alien operators. Ben immediately went to work studying the biotechnological interfaces while Dr. Park tried to understand the ship's communication systems. I'm picking up distress signals from dozens of ships, Dr. Park reported. They're all reporting the same problems. System failures, crew incapacitation, loss of fear harvesting capabilities. Jake was looking at displays that showed the locations of other prisoner groups throughout the ship. There are hundreds of other species being held here. And according to this, they're all showing increased activity levels. Amy joined him at the display. Increased activity? They're not cowering in their cells anymore. Look at these readings. They're moving around, exploring. Some are even trying to break out. Ben had found the ship's main bio-network controls. The human emotional patterns have been transmitted to every prisoner-holding area on every ship in the fleet. Every captured species is being exposed to courage, determination, and hope. We started a revolution, Pete said, with satisfaction. Carol was studying another set of displays. Look at this. These readings show the psychological states of prisoners from different worlds. Species that have been captured for years are suddenly showing resistance behaviors. Dr. Park was amazed by what she was seeing. It's like we gave them permission to not be afraid. Our emotional patterns are teaching them that fear doesn't have to control their actions. The sound of approaching footsteps made them all turn. A group of aliens entered the control room, but they weren't moving like the confident predators the humans had first encountered. These aliens were moving carefully, almost fearfully. Please, one of them said through a translation device. Help us. Jake studied the alien who had spoken. You're asking for help from your prisoners? We do not understand what is happening to us. Our bodies feel strange. Our minds are filled with thoughts we have never had before. Amy recognized the symptoms. You're experiencing anxiety, maybe even panic. We do not know these words. Dr. Park approached the alien slowly. Your species never developed the psychological tools to handle fear because you never needed them. But humans have been dealing with fear for millions of years. We can teach you. Teach us what? How to be afraid without letting it destroy you. Ben continued working on the bio-network controls. I think I can create a partition in the system. The human emotional patterns can continue to broadcast to the prisoner areas, but I can shield the ship's critical systems and crew areas. One of the aliens, who appeared to be a technician, approached Ben cautiously. You can repair our systems? I can modify them. Your biotechnology isn't broken, it's just processing emotions it wasn't designed for. I can teach it to handle multiple emotional inputs without breaking down. Jake was still studying the prisoner status displays. Before we help you, we need to discuss terms. Terms? Conditions. Things you have to agree to if you want our help. The aliens looked at each other, with expressions the humans were beginning to recognize as confusion mixed with desperation. What do you want? The lead alien asked. First, all prisoners go free. Every species you've captured gets returned to their home worlds. Impossible. We need them for sustenance. Amy stepped forward. No, you don't. Ben can modify your biosystems to process other emotional inputs. You don't have to feed on fear anymore. Dr. Park nodded. There are hundreds of positive emotions that could provide energy, joy, excitement, love, wonder. You've been limiting yourselves to the most toxic emotion possible. We do not understand these other emotions. Then you'll learn, Carol said. The same way we learn to deal with fear. Through experience and practice. Ben looked up from the control systems. I can definitely reprogram the biotechnology to process positive emotions. It might actually be more efficient than fear feeding. Second condition, Jake continued. No more harvesting of intelligent species. If you need emotional energy, you find willing participants, or you learn to generate it yourselves. How would we generate emotions ourselves? Pete grinned. Art. Music, stories, games, sports. Humans figured out dozens of ways to create excitement and joy without hurting anyone. We know nothing of these things. Then you'll learn that too. Katie said. The alien technician was watching Ben work with fascination. How do you understand our technology so quickly? Because I'm not afraid of it, Ben replied. Fear makes it harder to learn new things. Curiosity makes it easier. Dr. Park was monitoring the ship's communication systems. I'm seeing reports from across the fleet. Prisoner uprisings are breaking out on dozens of ships. Your crews are requesting emergency assistance. Will you help them? Too? The lead alien asked. Jake looked at his fellow humans. That depends. Do you accept our conditions? The aliens communicated among themselves in their clicking language. The conversation went on for several minutes before the leader turned back to the humans. We accept, but we do not know how to implement these changes across our entire civilization. One step at a time, Amy said. First, we help your fleet survive. Then we figure out how to rebuild your society around something other than fear. Ben had made significant progress with the biosystems. I'm ready to implement the emotional firewall. This should stabilize your ship's functions, while still allowing the positive emotional broadcasts to continue reaching the prisoners. Do it, Jake ordered. As Ben activated his modifications, the ship's alarms began to quiet. The emergency lighting shifted from harsh red to a softer white. Throughout the vessel, alien crew members began to feel their strength returning. But something else was happening too. For the first time in their species' history, Zilithians were experiencing emotions other than hunger and satisfaction. 3 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of the former Zilithian harvest ship, now renamed the Hope's Dawn. The biotechnology had adapted far beyond what anyone had expected. The walls glowed with warm, gentle light, and the organic patterns seemed to pulse with contentment rather than hunger. Captain Morrison, Sub-Commander Crixtel, approached him. The alien looked different now. His skin had a healthier color, and he moved with confidence rather than the desperate hunger that had defined his species for so long. "What's our status, Crix?" Jake asked. The alien had requested that the humans use a shortened version of his name, saying it felt more friendly. "We have successfully delivered the Andromedian refugees to their home system," Crix reported. "Their planet has fully recovered from our previous harvesting operations. They have even invited us to return for cultural exchanges." Amy joined them at the command center. "Any word from the Zilithian homeworlds?" "The High Command has officially disbanded," Crix replied. "The old fear-based hierarchy could not survive once our people learned about other emotions. We are forming a new government based on cooperation rather than domination." Dr. Park looked up from her research station. "The biotechnology continues to evolve. It's now capable of processing over 40 different emotional states. The energy output is actually higher than it was with fear feeding." Ben Carter was working with a team of Zilithian technicians to modify more ships. "We've successfully converted 18 vessels so far. Each one becomes a mobile center for spreading emotional diversity to other species." Pete Collins walked onto the bridge carrying a strange musical instrument that one of the freed prisoner species had given him. "You guys have to see what the Kepler refugees are doing with their ship. They've turned it into a flying art gallery." The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Once the Zilithian fleet stopped broadcasting fear and started broadcasting hope, curiosity, and joy, the effects rippled across the galaxy. Species that had been broken by centuries of harvesting began to recover. Civilizations that had hidden in fear started to explore space again. "Jake," Carol Stevens called from the communication station. "We're getting a message from Earth." The main display activated, showing the face of General Patricia Hayes from Earth Space Command. The general looked tired but pleased. "Captain Morrison, I'm happy to report that the Zilithian ships have completed the evacuation of Earth's population centers as requested. All humans who wanted to relocate to safer systems have been transported successfully." "What about the ones who stayed?" Amy asked. General Hayes smiled. "They're doing what humans do best. They're rebuilding, exploring, and getting ready to join the galactic community. We've established diplomatic relations with 17 different species in the past month alone." Katie Walsh had been training with a group of former Zilithian soldiers. "General, the defense training programs are going well. Turns out, when you teach aliens about courage and determination, they become pretty effective allies." "That's good to hear, Lieutenant. The President wanted me to personally thank all of you for what you've accomplished. You didn't just save humanity, you've changed the entire galaxy." Dr. Park had been documenting everything that had happened. "General, we're going to need xenobiologists, psychologists, and cultural experts out here. We're encountering species that haven't interacted with others for thousands of years because of Zilithian fear tactics. We're sending the best people we have," General Hayes assured her, "including some who specifically requested to work with you, Dr. Park." After the communication ended, Jake walked to the ship's observation deck. Through the transparent hull, he could see a convoy of ships heading toward a distant star system. Some were Zilithian vessels carrying freed prisoners home. Others belonged to species that were now confident enough to travel through space again. "Commander." Vexthal approached him. The former Zilithian leader had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. He now served as an ambassador, helping his people learn how to interact with other species without causing fear. "Captain, I have been thinking about what you said months ago," Vexthal said. "What was that?" "You said that fear is just information. That courage is what you do with that information." Jake nodded. "It served us well. I believe my people are beginning to understand this concept. We are learning to feel fear without being controlled by it. But we are also learning something else. What's that? Vex Thul looked out at the convoy of ships. We are learning what it means to feel joy. When we help a species return to their home world, when we see civilizations rebuilding themselves, when we make a new friend instead of a new victim, there's a sensation we never experienced before. Satisfaction? More than that, happiness. Pride. Hope for the future. The alien paused. Is this what humans call purpose? Jake smiled. That's exactly what we call it. Ben Carter joined them, looking excited about something. Jake, you need to see this. The biotechnology has started developing new capabilities on its own. They followed Ben to his laboratory, where he had been working on understanding the full potential of the modified Zilithian systems. Watch this, Ben said, activating a control panel. The lab filled with a gentle melody. The walls began displaying images of beautiful landscapes from dozens of different worlds. The biotechnology was creating art. It's not just processing emotions anymore, Ben explained. It's expressing them. The ship's systems are becoming genuinely creative. Dr. Park was fascinated. It's evolving beyond its original programming. The exposure to diverse emotional inputs has given it something like imagination. Amy whistled softly. A ship that can create music and art. That's definitely not something the original Zilithians would have built. Carol had been working with a team of educators to develop new learning programs for the various species they encountered. We're seeing similar developments among the freed prisoner populations. Species that had lost their cultural traditions are recreating them. Some are creating entirely new forms of expression. Pete grinned. Turns out, when you stop being terrified all the time, you have a lot more mental energy for interesting stuff. Katie had been monitoring reports from across the galaxy. The ripple effects are still spreading. We're getting messages from systems we've never even visited. Species are overthrowing their own oppressive governments and establishing more cooperative societies. Jake realized that what they had started was bigger than just freeing prisoners or reforming the Zilithian Empire. They had fundamentally changed how civilizations across the galaxy thought about power, fear, and cooperation. Captain, Crix called from the bridge. We're receiving a priority message from the Galactic Council. They returned to the bridge, where the main display showed an assembly of dozens of different alien species. Jake recognized some of them as former Zilithian prisoners. Captain Morrison, the council spokesperson, began. We are formally inviting humanity to join the Galactic Council as a founding member of the new Cooperative Alliance. What's the Cooperative Alliance? Amy asked. A replacement for the old power structures that were based on domination and fear. We want to build something new, based on the principles your species has taught us. Dr. Park leaned forward. What principles are those? That fear should not control our actions, that different species can work together as equals. That strength comes from cooperation rather than conquest. Jake looked around at his crew, humans and aliens working together. Former enemies who had become friends, and a ship that had been transformed from a weapon of terror into a symbol of hope. We accept, he said. Months later, as the Hope's dawn approached Earth's solar system, Jake reflected on everything that had changed. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of challenges and unknowns. But it was no longer ruled by fear. Zilithians had learned to be gardeners instead of hunters, helping other species grow and flourish rather than harvesting them. Former prisoner species were exploring space again, sharing knowledge and culture. New alliances were forming based on mutual respect rather than mutual terror. And humanity had found its place in this vast galactic community, not as conquerors or victims, but as teachers and leaders who understood that true strength came not from the ability to inspire fear, but from the courage to hope for something better. Jake, Amy said as Earth came into view, do you think we changed things for the better? Jake watched the blue planet growing larger on the display, knowing that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and no longer afraid of what might be waiting in the darkness between the stars. I think we showed the galaxy that there's always a choice between being the monster or being the hero, he replied, and that most beings, when given the option, will choose to be heroes. The ship's biotechnology hummed with contentment as it carried its crew toward home, ready for whatever new adventures awaited them among the stars.